All right, well, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Missy Trumpler, and I will be moderating our webinar today, which is all about AI and harnessing the power of AI for superior software development. Joining me is Scott Aziz. He is the founder and CTO of AgileAI Labs, as well as Peggy Knox, who is the COO, our Chief Operating Officer. And Scott, why don't you tell us a little bit about your sojourn into AI and how you started AgileAI Labs?
Yeah, thanks, Missy. So just a little bit of background. I've been in software quality engineering for 35 years, as well as software development for about 30 years. I actually started off as a QA engineer, doing a lot of test automation way back when. For those of you that know a little bit of the history of test automation, I actually worked with the very first commercial test automation tool, Microsoft Test. That was back in 1987, 88. So I've been in the field for a while. One of the things that's really interesting as we jump into the demo a little bit later, at least from a tooling perspective, is that what we're really looking to do here is to prevent software defects. And when you think about really my career and what I've done over really the 35 years, a lot of the work that I've done has been really to help organizations prevent software defects. So really looking forward to the talk today. And thanks everybody for joining. Yeah.
And Peggy, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about yourself and how you got involved with the company?
So good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us. I have roughly 25 years in financial verticals as my background. Most of that time spent either in ops or risk teams or a combination of the two. My time was fairly evenly split between the business side of the house and the technology side of the house. I'm not a coder. From the technology side, it was usually doing analysis, things like that, unless you want to go way back to the dinosaurs. I did do mainframe coding like JCL way back in the day. But I recently decided to step away from the banking stuff. And one of the CEO here and I had worked together previously. He reached out when he saw what Scott had and showed me what he came up with. He's like, "You're going to see this. It's great. It's dealing with AI," which honestly made me kind of roll my eyes a little bit. He's like, it's really good from a QA perspective. Well, I took one look at it and I was blown away. This is way beyond QA. All right. I've spent most of my career chasing defects, trying to prevent defects, writing user stories like in the past 5-7 years. I look at this tool and go, I would have actually gotten some sleep if this tool had been around like 7 years ago when I was standing up, different things for Wells Fargo with, writing the user stories and whatnot. And as those of you with the larger companies know, especially enterprise level, very complex, all right, with what's touching what, where dependencies are, ancillary systems coming in, things like that. So it's very easy to miss something or miss a major stakeholder, and you think you're making a simple change and you can break things. Then you spend more time chasing defects down than what the project should have taken to begin with. So sorry, Missy, long version. I'm just, I love the tool. It's like, I just look at the tool and say this, it's great to pull a seat up to the table with something that's going to help you avoid those defects right from the intake.
Well, and one of the things that we found is that with AI, obviously, it's really kind of scaring a lot of people at this point because of the eventual capabilities that we're going to get to. But the truth is that AI has been around really since the mid-1950s. And at this point in time, it's been a matter of taking it from the base level, and what some people are doing with it is a little scary, but necessity being the mother of invention, here we are now where we're able to apply it to business quality and functions. And I think that's really part of what Scott has brought to the table with showing that organizational side. Scott, I'd like you, if you don't mind, to talk a little bit about some of the logic that goes into training AI in order to do this work.
Yeah, so it's a really interesting question. This is hard work, right? I don't care what domain you're in, what vertical you're trying to focus on. Whenever you're trying to steer, particularly generative AI, to give you useful useful answers, relevant answers, and accurate answers. It's hard work, and as Missy mentioned, the training involved. So first of all, there's a lot of different types of and methods of training, and in fact, in order to get and build an intelligent generative AI system, you actually don't need to do training in the first place, but you do need to invest time into something like prompt engineering. We might touch on that a little bit later on, but suffice it to say, there's a lot going on right now in the field of AI around prompt innovation and prompt engineering. And for any of the folks that are listening right now, I would definitely encourage you to look at that and really do sort of read all of the articles, that are coming out now in this area. But definitely do some of your own research, because training can be, obviously that uses your own data, your organization's data, and any relevant vertical data that would be useful. But really, prompt engineering techniques now are becoming so mature, and there are a lot of papers being written. And in fact, I can share either after this webinar, I can share a couple of links that are really interesting and useful, particularly around some of the latest and greatest prompt engineering techniques and studies and papers that are being done by universities. Actually, very recently, Microsoft released a really interesting study around prompt engineering and how the effects of their study and the work that they have done have proven, for example, that you can get more out of prompt engineering. In other words, building a really smart, really useful, really thorough prompt versus spending all of that time training. And the answers that, if you read that study, hopefully you will, you'll be amazed. It was actually around the medical industry. They had an LLM, a medical-based LLM that was fully trained, and with prompt engineering techniques, Microsoft proved that you can use an untrained LLM like ChatGPT. You can use an untrained LLM to actually score higher on medical tests, on medical answers. It's pretty groundbreaking what's going on. But anyway, I wanted to share that because I think that's really important in the context of how we've built our system. And I'm not going to get into how we've built our system specifically because, we're a company and that's our secret sauce. But suffice it to say that, we are using the latest and greatest, from all of the research that our team has done, but also where our group is like a sponge, right? We're constantly looking, absorbing what's going on in the industry, looking at industry studies, taking all of those best practices and folding it into our platform.
Scott, when you're talking about LLM, large language models, what is it specifically that changed the game when bringing those into the fore with AI?
Well, yeah, so there have been a lot of advancements really in the last year. I think the biggest change, and again, I'm thinking about this more from a consumer perspective, I think the biggest change has been really the rollout, the introduction of GPTs like ChatGPT. Google has one, Anthropic has one, and so I think because of that, we're now exposing LLM technology, generative AI technology to millions and tens of millions of users. And I think that's really brought a sea change in terms of exposing the absolute power of LLMs to the world. In addition to that, from a technology perspective, there has been a lot of interesting science that has been going on in the past couple of years. And, suffice it to say that it's not just about software. It's not just about internal training methods and breakthroughs. A lot of it has to do with hardware, the optimization of hardware. You'll read about that. You actually look, if you do investment, you'll see It's amazing some of the chip makers, how their stock has boomed over the past couple of years, specifically around the fact that they are building chips that allow optimization of LLM training. So it's sort of a convergence of a number of different things from a technology perspective, but it's a great question.
So on top of that, when we've been talking about AI, and this is something that I want you to answer on this side, Peggy, is from the business perspective, because Scott's been heavily involved in the development side. What are some of the things that you see are the most important for a business to qualify when deciding what type of AI enhanced tool they're going to use?
That's actually a tough question, right? Because it's going to depend on the company and what their needs are. But from like, I've done project management. I pretty much I've been in every piece of SDLC, including taking a project from the intake, actually identifying we need a project and walking it all the way through the end, including defect remediation, everything on it. And I'm going to say, like, really what you need is a tool that's going to be at the table as a partner, right? Like, honestly, people, AI, it's never going to take over with this kind of stuff. It can't. I mean, I guess it could, but it's going to do a bad job of it, right? Because you need that kind of human touch in it, human interaction, people understanding how the users are actually using it, what they're thinking, what's important to them, things like that. All right. I mean, and I'm going to kind of focus, just for sake of clarity. Let's say we're focusing on a UI, that we're looking to make some kind of a change or develop a UI that is going to be for our customer base. All right. What your customers need, things like that. So the UI is never going to, AI is never really going to be able to fully take over and do that in as creative a way as a human could. But if you have an existing, all right, or even if you're creating something new, excuse me, where the AI comes in handy is, think of this as kind of, it's like a big brain sitting at, in the chair next to you, where you've got all these moving pieces that you have to think about and remember that have to tie together. These are all my stakeholders. These are the obscure ones. Oh yeah, there's a calc engine over here that we need to tag and pull data in from. There's so many moving pieces. And those of you who've run projects now, something gets missed. It just does. I've never, ever in my entire career, I've seen a project go through with 0 defects. No such thing. Right? Either there's either ambiguity with the requirements, or missed requirements, or misunderstood requirements. That's where the AI, I think, brings value to the table, because it's going to help clear these things up. It's going to help remember things like, hey, you have this tertiary system that you use, excuse me, to get your calculations from for this field. When somebody set this up 5 years ago, the original team's not here. Nobody remembers. It's not well documented, which, let's be honest, I don't think anybody is doing a great job documenting these days, because the speed at which we all have to move with our projects and the development efforts, right? So documentation's not what it should be. But even then, the complexity is so great that it is virtually impossible for one human being to remember all the moving pieces for everything. But even then, you move on. Your legacy person doesn't know any of it. All right. So now you start getting into real trouble with this. So I think it's, Missy, it's having a tool where it's going to bring to the table the ability to say, hey, I captured, your requirements and stuff. I looked at it. Here's some guardrails that you should be, just in general, keeping on, this project as you move forward. But as the tool learns about your company and your application, it's going to look at it and say, now here's some things that are specific to your application that I don't see you captured in your requirements. So you better go grab these stakeholders, because they view you as a system of record for that information, and don't see them on this list, or you're not accounting for the fact that you're planning on sunsetting something and people are actually pulling data from you, or vice versa, right? Where the system might know about some application or platform that's about to be sunset that is critical to you, but nobody's told you about.
Right.
So it's things like that I think it brings to the table that it's just very difficult for a human to do.
Well, another thing that we've talked about quite a bit internally is the need for traceability and transparency.
Yeah.
Also audit readiness, and that's been key. And Scott, I'm hoping at this point you can bring up the tool so we can start taking a look at it. And we really want to show the difference in being able to strategize and organize, as well as add the speed that everybody is hearing about with AI and how it can change. It can really change the dynamic of an entire software development project. Now, what I can see you have on the screen is all the projects. What does it look like when we try to enter into and this beauty right here is known as spec to test AI.
Yes.
And it's that simple. So why don't you go ahead, Scott, and you can start telling us about our wonderful tool here.
Yeah. So hopefully everybody can see the screen well now. And by the way, just chat if it's not scaled enough, I'll increase the size. But basically, what we've done is built the platform around a very important design principle, which is ease of use, and specifically targeting the entirety of the Agile team. So what does that mean? That means that both technologists and business users should be able to work with our tool with ease. Literally everything from that we have coded up, everything that we've designed, all of the componentry that we've built is very, very simple from a UI perspective, very simple to use. Here's the example of setting up a new project. There's 6 fields. And besides some of the more benign things like the project name, the purpose, and the goal, there are some really important fields here, such as defining the platform that the project would be installed on or be a part of, defining the application name, and then defining any ancillary applications. So it's a very simple setup from a sort of the step one. And I'll show you as we walk through the tool, there's literally 3 steps in the tool. And this is part of the setup for step one.
And Scott, I'm going to just jump in real quick.
Yeah.
From my perspective anyway, this is a tool that I mostly see the business using. All right. I think it's actually critical to get this kind of tool into the hands of the business partners who are actually handling project intake. They're gathering the requirements, because this tool is going to offer them the direction they need. And honestly, they should, speaking as former business person, right? If they can't answer any of these questions, their tech support teams can. All right. So these are not difficult questions to answer. And quite honestly, because I know somebody did say to me, yeah, but what if they don't know? Honestly, if you don't know what platform you're on or your application, all right, or what ancillary is tied to, you've got no business putting a request in for a code change or a configuration change that's going to touch anything there, right? You need to know this stuff before you make any kind of change to any kind of UI.
By the way, I just want to chime in. If anyone out there has any questions, please feel free to put it into the.
Missy, you just muted.
We are going to answer those questions at the end. Okay, Scott.
All right. So let us jump into a project. And so basically the way the UI works is you just literally go ahead and click on a project that's already been set up. There's a hierarchy of within a project, you have requirements. You can add as many requirements as you want, an unlimited number of requirements. Requirements are basically category folders or high-level folders for your user stories. So we, simply click on a requirement within any project. In this particular requirement, we have 4 user stories, as you can see here. And we can go ahead and add as many as we need to satisfy the high-level requirement, which then, of course, maps back to the original project. So let's do one thing. Let us jump into one of these. As I told you earlier, very simple organization. Step 1, step 2, step 3. And what you're looking at here is the requirement information as part of step 1. So basically what this is, specifically what this is an understanding of what is happening at the user story level. This is your customer information, your story, specific story information that you are defining, your acceptance criteria, And all of that information gets logged and put together as part of the analysis that we do here in step 2. So actually, Peggy, do you have anything to add?
No, actually, unless I take it back, I've always got something to add. Just in case anybody was wondering, with the acceptance criteria, we've done extensive testing, as well as we've had, beta testers and POC testers do extensive testing. We've gone acceptance criteria light and acceptance criteria heavy. And we've gotten actually pretty robust results in both directions, because even with the acceptance criteria light, you kind of get a little bit of a lecture back from the tool with it telling you, you don't have anywhere near enough information here. Here's some of the stuff that you need as a starting point. All right, this is just jumping off point. You need to go and track down this stuff and answer that before we can start doing a deep dive. So the tool will help guide you, even if you are very acceptance light.
Great. So I'm actually going to jump to a tab I've already got opened here. And what I'd like to do is actually show you specifically what analysis we're doing. One of the most important design principles of the platform is the fact that we are aligning and measuring against industry frameworks. Many of you are probably very familiar with Invest. We actually measure against 5 different frameworks. So what are we measuring? We're actually measuring the contents of the story and the contents of the acceptance criteria in detail. We're doing a very, very deep dive, a deep analysis around all of that information. So we provide scores across these 5 different frameworks. You see 4 here at the top, and there's a 5th one that I will show you in a minute. Any of these banners, you can simply come over here and click on. And what you get here are sub measures. In other words, we measure each of the 32 attributes individually so that you can understand the specific scoring that's going on. We also provide very detailed information, guidance, advice for every single attribute. So you get 32 pieces of information around all of the framework measures that are built into the platform. Why is this important? It's very important because ultimately what we are doing here is we are helping the user build a better user story and ultimately a better requirement. So let's jump into a little bit more of what we're doing on this screen. This is the second step. One of the very earliest things we do is actually build a requirements table. This requirements table is really quite useful. What we do is we take all of the acceptance criteria and any other detail that we can get out of the user story. We break it down into the type of requirement. We repeat the description that's there, and then we generate questions for stakeholders. So this is really important, really useful for all of the early discussions that need to happen. These questions get automatically generated. They are contextually based. In other words, these questions are put together based on the information or lack thereof that is in the user story and the acceptance criteria. What we're finding is that users are taking this information, they're bringing it back to their stakeholders. They're having fruitful discussions using these questions to continue to groom and tease out the context that they need to build a better requirement and build better business context. So this is a really quite a useful feature where we're generating questions. We automatically generate an enhanced requirement. So let me show you that in detail. On the right-hand side is the original story that was entered. On the left-hand side is the enhanced requirement, or the enhanced user story and the enhanced acceptance criteria. What you'll find is, for example, where a user has come in here and left some ambiguity, right? So in this case, they're mentioning mobile wallets as part of the acceptance criteria. The tool will go ahead and fill out, as an example, specifics around that. Similarly, where they may be talking about something like messaging, right? So if there's a confirmation message that needs to be displayed, for example, our tool will make sure to, from a language perspective, make sure to add an example, a more specific example. And the reason why this is really important, in fact, you can see that here. Here's a message such as, "Thank you, your transaction has been successfully processed." Well, that's something that's really simple. It certainly wasn't included in the original requirement, but the reason why our AI engine is doing this is because part of the philosophy of this engine is to actually train the users. So what do we mean by train? We mean take all of the frameworks that we're invested in, all of those 32 different attributes that we're measuring, and go ahead and in this enhanced requirements generation, provide them with more detail aligned to those framework best practices. Now, these are examples, and of course, we can't read minds. So, but the point is that we're providing these samples or examples and more detail wherever we can, because it's really critical to show the users that are building these stories the best practices around how to provide enough detail, what is the right context to provide, etc. And so that's why the engine is going ahead and elaborating on whatever it sees here. Now, there's another interesting thing here at the bottom, really important. And in fact, at first glance, you might look at this and say, so let's take a look at what's red here, align the payment gateway with the mobile responsiveness and dark theme support. We don't see any of that here. So on first glance, you might say, well, this is just AI hallucinating. But that's actually not what's happening. What's happening here is there are stories tied at the requirement level that are related to this user story. What our AI system does is it looks across, it does a scan across all of those related stories, and it's going to pull out, as it has here, important requirements, that acceptance criteria that should be mentioned as part of the original story. So when we say we actually help write AI, our AI helps write a requirement, it literally does help write a requirement. So anyway, this is something that I did want to show. Peggy, any thoughts here?
No, I think you covered that perfectly. This gets you a view that right now you have to try to remember every moving piece in your head.
Yeah.
So this is great.
Yeah. We also generate security requirements. We're very focused on the OWASP ASP model. And then we generate behavior-driven development assets, a feature file as well as a step definition file. And so that is our step 2, our analysis piece.
Scott, just to add real quick.
Yeah.
With the security requirements,
yes.
Excuse me. Obviously, we don't know your platform. We don't know your application. We don't know what security you have wrapped around any of that. Our security requirements are a jumping off point, all right? Because honestly, and again, speaking as a kind of former project manager, project sponsor, all the way through the process, right? It's amazing how often people would forget about the security piece of it, all right? And not either build it in for, when they're building their test cases or test scripts. That stuff got missed, especially with something internal a lot, and even for an internal change, you have to make sure, as I'm sure all of you know, that you don't inadvertently circumvent your security because you just went and made what appeared to be, again, a minor change to some field. So with this, it's not specific to your platform, your application, or your firewalls, but it is it's a guideline for basic things that you should be doing every time anyway. And it's a good reminder for you to do that deep dive into what is specific to your space.
And once they add those security requirements that are specific to their companies, are they not then acknowledged through the different user stories as the analysis is happening?
So the way that they're used is actually in step 3, mostly in the test cases. Yeah, and we'll see that. Yeah.
Okay, go ahead, Scott. Let's see step 3.
All right. So the third step is really our implementation for test engineers, for the quality assurance organization. And what we do is we automatically generate test cases from that enhanced requirement. Foundationally, the work that we do here in step 2 in the analysis step is absolutely critical and really does dictate the success that we can have as we generate test cases from that original requirement. As you saw earlier, the test cases are created directly from the enhanced requirement. So that means that as we've introduced additional context, which is context from additional stories, those test cases will actually be automatically generated as well. The way that we generate test cases is very rigorous. We actually use mathematical models. And I'm not going to go into all of the modeling that we do, but fundamentally, we generate a cause and effect table, and we generate which are decision tables. We also generate a pairwise combination table for users if they're interested, in actually going through data-driven permutations in terms of implementing something like pairwise testing. But to talk about what we were just talking about 3 minutes ago, the security test cases, again, are automatically generated based on the context of the functional stories, but also merged with all of the in step 2, all of those security recommendations around those requirements. So we actually generate, again, we are very focused on OWASP, and we generate very specific testing instructions and guidance for OWASP Zap. I'm not sure if anybody on the call is familiar with Zap. It is a free tool. We tend to like free tools. So that's why all of the guidance that we're giving is very specific to that. The reason why we've built in security test cases is because, unfortunately, in many organizations, security testing is an afterthought. It is not something that is planned for or done upfront. There's a lot of reasons for that, but it is absolutely critical when you think about, holistically building quality into a platform and testing as thoroughly as possible. You cannot leave out security or app pen testing. So that's what this is about. We generate edge and negative tests automatically. Again, those are also done using mathematical models. And you'll notice, all of the same, everything's labeled, but we use all of the same format, which we have a 5-point format for all of our test case generation. We have a description, the preconditions, any test data, then the test steps, and then the expected result. So every single test that you ever see is going to have that format without fail. But yeah, so that is that piece. We also do things like generate traceability for you. For those of you that are involved in Agile and Scrum, it's really, really quite useful, if you're doing a retrospective, for example, to have proof, to have evidence that, yeah, we've got 100% traceability. For a test engineer to actually start writing all of this up and documenting it is, as you all know, very tedious. So we like to save test engineers as much time as we can. And we generate all of the documentation, the evidence for you automatically. We also automatically generate Selenium code. We can do this in 5 different languages. The code, these are frameworks that are generic frameworks, but they are modeled after all of the test cases that you see here, right? So all of the functional happy path test cases get put in, they actually get put into the Selenium code. And so the test engineer has a nice starting point if they're writing in Selenium, a really nice starting point where they don't have to actually take all of those approved tests and start coding them. We give them a nice template here to get started with. So that is how our Selenium code generator works.
That also is a big help for scoping the project in the beginning, isn't it, Scott?
It really is. Yeah. I mean, to be able to automatically generate in a matter of minutes from a set of requirements, code, a framework, an outline for Selenium code is really quite useful. But similarly, on the test case side, right? As if you generate, if I can now generate from requirements, if I can generate test cases reliably, rigorous test cases reliably, I can now have a much better understanding of how big this particular project is going to be and the work that is ahead of our team. And again, we can generate all of this material in under 5 minutes. So it is it's really a game changer.
Right. And I'm going to jump in for a second, just because while we're talking about the test cases, that was one of the things that I loved right from the beginning, which is, again, I see this in the hands of the business. All right. I see this in everybody's hands. I think it benefits every step of the way through SDLC, but definitely in the hands of the business, because before I even send the first line of code or the request for scoping, even, never mind change code, I can plug all this information into the tool, get this back. And speaking from experience, usually my first view into the fact that either I totally jacked up how I was asking for something to be done, or I missed a requirement, or what made perfect sense in my head as a SME made something completely different to my developer. All right. I get back the test cases. I'm looking at the test cases and going, and this, by the way, all the coding has pretty much been done, right? So it's a done deal, right? We've already got money spent here, but I'm getting my test cases back from, the QA team going, hey, does this look right to you? Or can you clarify, we want you to sign off on them. And I'm like, where's this? Where's this? How come this stuff's in here? And what the heck is that? All right. But again, it's 6 weeks down the road, too late, because now I have to come up, now we don't just have scope creep. We've got scope gap going on. My costs are going out of control. We've got the spin going on with the phone calls with, was this my mess up? Did the developer mess up? You know what I mean? The finger pointing starts before you can even start, remediating the situation with, how do we get this back on the track where it needs to be? So I look at it and go, before I ask for a thing, I can look all the way to the end and say, is what we're testing for, is that what I'm looking for an outcome? Because if it's not, I need to go back and tweak my requirements and make whatever changes is necessary, so that what I'm seeing is the output to be tested. That's what I was looking for. All right. The developers, I view this, and I understand they get buried, in documentation they have to read. However, as a developer, if you're looking at some requirement and you're like, I'm not quite sure what that means, very simply go to the test case that corresponds to it and read what's going to be tested. Now you know exactly how to code it, right? So all the spin with defects and miscommunication and all that, I don't think it's going to eliminate it completely, but I think you're going to see a serious reduction in it for anybody who's using this tool.
Peggy, one of the things you had commented on multiple times are the edge and negative tests. Why do you find those so important? Because a lot of people don't use those.
Well, they are. And the thing is, I'm kind of seeing, like, I'm going to say the past 10, 15 years, I'm kind of, I've mostly in financial verticals. I did some consulting, so you can't really narrow it down. I'm not talking about any one company, right? But even with friends talking about it across industries, I'm seeing a reduction in the amount of edge and negative testing that's going on. And it comes down to time, right? Everybody is really pushed to their limit and beyond. All right. So it's like nobody really has a lot of bandwidth to begin with. And a lot of the companies, you have to move at such a speed where there's just no time sometimes to do this quite as properly as you should. So I'm watching that get kind of less and less as time goes on. And it's important, right? Because you want to do your negative testing to make sure that if I shouldn't be able to do something, I changed something, so let me go change, check my CRUD. Is my, create, read, update, delete, is my CRUD still, for my role still working properly? Did I just inadvertently blow it out where somebody who should only have read, provisioning all of a sudden has edit rights? You know what I mean? That's some of like the negative testing that should get done. Edge testing, you definitely want to see if we push the parameters, is it bringing my platform down or my application down, or can it handle it when it goes to those, upper outer edges of things? So it's important, but it's kind of going by the wayside because people are looking more at, no, let's just test the functionality. Like that outer stuff almost never happens. Yeah, but when it does, that's the stuff that blows you up and takes like, a bank down for 3 days, right? Yeah. So it's a big deal. It's important stuff.
We keep seeing a lot these days about the fact that testing is getting kind of pushed to the on the sidelines, and yet we have
Yeah,
a $2.4 trillion quality problem in
yeah,
software just in the United States alone. Where if
yeah.
we focused more on testing and gave that the props it deserves, I think we would have a much more robust and better, truly better software in the long run.
Yeah, it's important stuff. And I think introducing automation with some of this, it's, it- and I get that some of the testing itself is being automated. But again, I still look at that and go, I don't think you're ever going to fully get rid of a human, because there's nuances that you need to understand sometimes with things, right? And part of that testing is understanding, it's not always a clear case of if this, then this. Sometimes there's a few if this, then this, but it's a blue moon kind of thing, nuance going on in the background somewhere.
And with this tool, there's also two layers of it. There's a base user who can use and work on a project at any given point in time, but there's also the admin level where they can view all projects that are going on within the tool at the same time. Of course, that's siloed to their company and organization. I don't mean all of them, throughout the spectrum, but that also gives an opportunity to have a higher level view of all the different projects and how they're connecting.
Right. And Missy, and I also think another thing is the tool comes in handy for two things. Number one, you use it for your actual project because it's going to help you with moving pieces, right? Because somebody else is entering something, they're doing it like a different path of the project, but maybe something they're doing, to Scott's point earlier, the requirements, when it does the analysis, it knows to look across and go, hey, there's something else going on. So make sure you're pulling that into what your plans are. But also, again, as somebody who's done this, I can easily, if I was, real world with this, I could easily see me using this for scoping before I even, go to my EVP and go, hey, can I have a little bit more funding? Because I'm going to come out here, look at it and say, how feasible is it? Is it something I think I can, get a team on this year and deliver? You know what I'm saying? It's like I can actually do some basic scoping before I even go to my tech teams. Right. And ask them to scope the degree of work. I can figure out what's approximately the cost, or a major stakeholder that just showed up is compliance. And I know compliance has something major going on this year. So they're going to have no bandwidth. So I know to shelf this till next year. You know what I'm saying? It's the tool, I think it's real world, what's going on right now, but also for planning and just scoping out to plan, what are my future projects?
Yep. Yeah, just two other mentions really quickly. You can export, if you want to move all the generated test cases or any of the other assets for that matter, export these out and bring them into another system. Additionally, back here at step one, you don't have to start from scratch from any of the story or any of the acceptance criteria. We have a Jira plugin, for example, that will allow you to, during the usage of the plugin, just select an action while you're on a user story in Jira, and that issue and all of the data related to it will automatically migrate to our platform. So you don't have to copy and paste your user stories into our system, for example. You can use the Jira plugin to get everything over here. So I just wanted to point those two things out.
We have a couple of questions that come in. I think now's probably a good time to address some of those.
Sure.
Abdul Faraz asked us a question, which is, which stage of BDD is this tool recommended to be used? Is it replacing any BDD process like illustration?
So it is a helper for illustration. It is a very big helper, right? So here's the thing. If you've got all of these questions for stakeholders while you're having your discussions from a BDD perspective, the three Amigos discussions, our take is that our AI tool, Spec to Test AI, is actually the fourth Amigo. And it's the fourth Amigo because we are automatically helping you generate very contextual, specific questions that you can take back to, as you're generating the BDD assets, as you move through the BDD journey. Technically, we really shouldn't be generating, as those of you on the call that are aware of the BDD process, it's not a best practice to go ahead and start generating this stuff directly from the requirement. You should be having fruitful, thoughtful discussions, using, as I mentioned, using the questions as well as your own questions, your own contextual analysis around all of the behavior of the platform. Now, one other thing, I didn't show it, but one other thing that is also useful is we have this clarification needed button. This is basically a deep dive, and this is additional, very useful information from a BDD perspective as you think about your traditional illustration during that process. These are additional questions that you could potentially bring into that. The whole point of the clarification needed section is that, look, when you're working on your user stories, everyone recognizes that user story is not one and done. This is an iterative process. I don't care what methodology you're using. It needs to be iterative because you need to have those thoughtful discussions with the business. You need to go through all of the technology discussions. You need to do the trade-offs, right? What should we include? What can we include in this sprint? What should we scope for next sprint, for example? But the more information that you can provide our AI engine, the better off you're going to be, particularly with regard to helping you quickly through the illustration phase of BDD. So again, these are additional questions that are contextually relevant, that our system says, hey, you've got enough information, right? I'm still going to provide you with all of the analysis that it already has. You've seen all of the analysis, but this is more of a additional clarification information panel that gives you these additional contextual questions that, as you go through those discussions, you can use some of these questions to further refine, further tune, and further hone in on really building a better requirement, building better user stories and acceptance criteria. But yeah, it was a long-winded answer to that, but there's a lot of nuances here in how you use some of the assets that we've generated.
All right. Well, speaking of additional questions, I'm going to ask one from Jake Hamblin, and he wants to know, for the code generation, can the platform selection at the beginning of the process influence what framework tool uses to generate the code?
Yeah, it can, as long as you're providing that technological platform information at the beginning. In other words, again, one of the principles of design around our platform is that we have a lot of guardrails set up so that we are not making up information, right? We're not just pulling information out of thin air. So
we're
in
not
this case,
GPT, Scott, is that what you're saying?
exactly. So yeah, so in this case, right, if I'm providing technology specific information from a platform perspective, whether it be the infrastructure, the software, the languages that it's written in, the API connections, whether or not it's a microservices application, I should be providing, if I on the other end, if I really need all of that detail built ultimately into my stories or into my acceptance criteria, I need to be providing that up front. So yes, if you provide that information, the more platform specific technology outputs you will get.
Right.
That was a great question. This is another really good question, because we used to ask this internally in the beginning ourselves. If the requirements change or are removed, how is that handled by the tool?
Yeah, so the tool is designed for requirements to change constantly, right? And when I say designed for that, again, this goes back to our principle of ease of use. So what do I need to do if a requirement actually changes, right? I'm going to come back here, whether I've just made a massive change or a small change in Jira and I just pulled it in here, or I've just gone in here and made a change, or maybe I've copied and pasted this. All I have to do is go ahead and click on the Save and Analyze button. What happens is we go through, basically what we do is we go through an effort where we rework or regenerate all of the assets that you see here from a requirements perspective. Now, all of this happens in the background. It happens in the course of about 2 minutes. And what the beauty of this is all I've had to do is click a single button, right? And so all of my new assets and all of the relationships across the old user stories where the analysis is required to generate, all of that information will get directly pulled into this new analysis that you see happening here right now. So there's literally nothing for you to do other than click that button. Now, what will also happen is, as you do this and you generate your new analysis, of course, you are going to go ahead and have to generate new testing assets. Because again, the testing assets are based off of all of the analysis and all of the data in step 2. So you do have to go through the progression when things change. But again, it's just it's a click of a single button to actually do that.
And actually, Scott, I'm going to add to that. If it's something where it's not I'm going to say there's no such thing as a non-material requirement change, right?
Yeah.
If it's not a major change, though, and Scott can show you kind of in the step 2, if you're looking at saying, look, the requirement is close, I just want to tweak it a bit. So in the enhanced requirements, that's what the is going to be read. That's what the tool is going to read for the test cases. You can go out there and just make some changes to the enhanced requirement tab if you want. That tab, I don't think we mentioned it before, it is editable. All right. So you can go out there and say, the test case is close. I don't feel like going all the way back and having to rerun everything. I can just tell it, let me go just tweak up my enhanced, requirement tab with whatever it is that needs to be maybe just a little bit more finite, with how it's being captured, and then generate your test cases again and see if that took care of it for you.
You're actually on the perfect screen right now for our next request. This one comes from Anna Roisman, and she's asking, please expand on the industry standards for the specifications that you validate the requirements against. You had mentioned invest. What are they, and how are the requirements being validated against them? Like an alert? Is it a question, or is that come up with the clarifications needed?
Yeah, everything gets presented directly in the panels, right? So there's a score, there's an individual score for example, each of the attributes. In this case, under the SMART criteria, we have specificity. In terms of what they are, we have definitions within each panel. But these are industry standard. When I say industry standard, everybody knows what what SMART is or what invest is. So that's how we actually measure it. Now, what goes into all of this analysis is not a very simple thing. And what we've had to do is through the thousands of hours of training, provide very specific examples. We've had to provide good examples. We've had to provide bad examples around specificity. We've had to do that across different domains. So there's a lot of training involved in order for us to actually get useful feedback from the AI engine automatically. But we've honed it now to the point where all of the feedback comes in these 4 panels. And there is a 5th panel. It's right here. This is our ambiguity analysis. And basically what this does is it takes the ambiguity, it scores the ambiguity. You can see here the original score was 3, and it goes ahead and it actually removes all of the ambiguous elements according to a 7-point framework that we use. So the AI has actually gone ahead and made the changes for you automatically. The reason why in this particular case with ambiguities we make changes automatically is because ambiguities, as most of you know, can sink the ship when it comes to a project. 25, 30, 35% of requirements related defects can be traced back to ambiguous elements of a user story or of a requirement. So the AI actually removes that for you automatically. The great thing about our platform, and you'll see this all the way through our platform, we tell you exactly what we have done. We don't leave anything to the imagination. So, in this case, vague terms such as variety and most convenient were replaced with specific examples of payment options. and the addition of PCI DSS compliance, right? So this was actually changed. And so when you analyze the requirement, side by side with the original, with the enhanced, you'll see that's where that particular element came from. This was an ambiguity. It came from the ambiguity framework, and the ambiguity framework basically enabled AI to make this change because we do not want ambiguous statements at all in our enhanced requirement, in our completed product. So hopefully that helps, but that's a great question.
And this is actually where you get better and better and better at your job in putting in user stories and creating requirements. The tool trains you to get better. And we actually want you to experience this for yourselves. If you go to our website at AgileAILabs.com, you can go to our pricing page, and basically you can go in and try our tool for free. We're giving everybody a free 14-day trial. If you have interest in learning how it works, please head over again to our website, AgileAILabs.com. We're also going to put up the resources there that Scott was talking about earlier, where he was saying that there are new and brilliant things coming out of AI, and we're going to keep putting those there. And of course, he's blogging all the time. Scott's our resident blogger. And if you have any more questions, you can feel free to contact and connect with us either on LinkedIn. We're on LinkedIn again, AgileAI Labs, or you can connect with us through our website. And we are happy to provide you whatever further information you would like.
Yeah, listen,
go ahead.
I'm going to jump in for a second. So anybody who is interested, enjoys reading articles, like truly, this is not self-serving, because like Scott, I have nothing but respect from. He's a brilliant writer. He posts twice a week on our LinkedIn website. So what I would really recommend is anybody who likes staying on top of whatever the latest and greatest is that's coming out with AI that, you want Scott's take on, go, sign up for that, and you'll get notified as Scott posts. Usually it's Tuesday and Thursday afternoons. They're, at the very least, they're interesting. You may not agree with everything, his, analysis or his maybe summary, but it's always a fascinating read. And sometimes he has some really interesting interplay going back and forth with one or two people who have a different stance maybe. So it's always entertaining watching that LinkedIn.
Those are always my favorite, especially in this new frontier of AI, because there's so many different perspectives on it, to be, quite frank.
Very, very strong perspectives, yes.
and that's the thing. So many folks are afraid of the fact that this is going to come in and take over jobs. The truth is AI knows nothing more than what we've taught it, at least ours for sure. And in addition to that, it should be a seat at the table. It should not clear the table. You need AI as a tool, and it should not be any other way around. And to give it more credence or kudos than that really isn't accurate. It's not reliable. So, all right, folks. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Scott, Peggy. Thank you so much for your time. Scott, thank you for taking us through the tool. And once again, if you would like to have a free demo of the tool, just go onto our website at www.agileailabs.com. It's up in the chat, and we look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anna.